Use a piece of wire or a magnet to manage your cam chain and remove the cam chain slider. Next, remove any cylinder fasteners. Use a plastic hammer to loosen the cylinder from the base gasket before removal. Now remove the cylinder, base gasket, any dowels or water joints. Use a rag as shown to prevent the circlip from falling to the bottom end. Remove the circlip using an awl or other suitable tool. Holding your finger over the circlip while removing will prevent it from springing out at you. Next, remove the wrist pin and inspect. There should be no scoring or bluing on the pin. It can be measured with a micrometer, but generally, if there's any ridges you can feel by hand, replace it. The lack of anti-friction coating and machine marks will indicate piston wear. Check the connecting rod. If any kind of vertical play can be felt, you'll need to replace the crankshaft. Also visually inspect the small end of the connecting rod. Replace if you notice any scoring or bluing. Check the wrist pin clearance with a known good pin. If you can feel any vertical play at all, the crankshaft will need to be replaced. Check the cylinder for any deep ridges or gouges. Any ridges that can be felt by hand are beyond the service limits. If the cylinder is still in good usable condition, you should create a crosshatch to seat the piston rings using a deglazing hone and cutting fluid. This will also remove any small scratches in the cylinder bore. This process only takes 10 to 15 seconds. Any more can cause damage. These small scratches in the bore are the crosshatch. They should be at a 45-degree angle. Be sure to clean the cylinder thoroughly with brake clean or degreaser. When wiped with a clean towel, there should be no visible residue. To make installation of the piston easier, install one circlip. When installing the circlip, have the open end facing the 6 o'clock position. Carefully install the circlip as shown. When installed properly, the circlip will be seated in the pin boss groove and the open end will be at 6 o'clock. Next, install the oil control rings. First, install the spring-like ring. Make sure its ends are butted against each other and not overlapping. Now install the other 2 oil control rings on top of the spring ring. Make sure the openings of these oil control rings aren't all in a row. They should be about 120 degrees away from each other. For the next 1 or 2 rings, install with any letters or markings facing up. Most piston rings come with instructions on ring placement. If not, the center ring will be the biggest, and the top ring will more than likely have an inner bevel. Install the center scraper ring followed by the top compression ring. With all the rings installed, make sure that the end gaps are all located as far apart around the piston as possible. Check with the piston manufacturer to see which way it's to be installed on the connecting rod. In this case, the arrow indicates the exhaust side of the piston. Lubricate the wrist pin with engine oil before installation. With the piston facing the proper direction, install on the connecting rod. Be careful not to damage or bend any of the piston rings. Carefully install the second circlip. Be sure the open end of the circlip faces the 6 o'clock position. Again, be sure to use a shop towel to prevent any lost circlips. Thoroughly clean the gasket surface and install a new base gasket. Now reinstall any removed water joints or cylinder dowels. Lubricate the cylinder with clean engine oil and install on the piston. Compress the piston rings by hand until the cylinder slides over them. Once the cylinder reaches the oil control rings, you'll need to use a slight rocking back and forth motion to get the rings seated in the cylinder. Double check the piston rings to make sure they're seated properly in their lands and not catching on the cylinder. As you can see, it might take a couple tries to get the oil control rings to seat properly. Be sure to use more rocking than downward force to make this easier. Pull the cam chain through and slide the cylinder down into place. Now install any removed cylinder fasteners. You'll need to retorque these after the head is installed. Carefully turn the engine over to make sure the piston's moving smoothly through the bore. Be sure to hold the cam chain to prevent binding the crank. Set the piston at top dead center, install the cam chain slider, and you're ready to reinstall the head.